Hey everyone, in this video let's create the stylized sand material. Start off with an anisotropic noise. You can choose the angle. I just like to work with a 45 degrees. Let's blur this. Duplicate the nodes to create two more variations with larger scale values to basically get smaller details. Let's multiply these. And we will get these bumpy streaks with some varying sizes and some flat areas. I like to blur it a tiny bit. To adjust this, we will use a levels. Maybe we can invert it so we can add some darker variation later. Now to get the wavy look, we can use a warp. For the intensity, let's add a circle. Increase the softness to get the fall off. Now we can tile this. We're not gonna mess around with the pattern too much. So a tile scatter would be overkill, and a simple tile node is enough and we can get the same result, but there's less parameters so it's easier to use. Just add some variation to the luminance, to the size, and increase the offset to get alternating pattern. We can use this with our warp. By the way, if you encounter these artifacts, I believe they are called stepping and they have to do with the bit depth of the image. We can fix this by going to the top of the screen to the execution settings and find the type. This basically occurs when our bit depth is too low. The full range 16-bit is the cause for this. We can go for the full range 32-bit and that fixes it. You can also use the normalized 16-bit which keeps the file size low, but it's obviously a little bit lower quality than the 32-bit, and you definitely do not want to go with the 8-bit for the height map in any scenario. Coming back to the material, basically our warp node is pushing out the pixels based on the white pixels from our gradient input. You can play with the intensity to understand how that works. Right now, you can notice some harsh lines where each of our circles end. We already have the circle softness at 1, so to fix this, we just add a blur node. Default is fine, or you can adjust till the edges disappear. Now, I was experimenting with some waves, similar to what we did with the anisotropic noise with varying size. We can use the warp with the same gradient input. Blending them, and average works for this as both the inputs are dark. Multiply this with our base and I just want to adjust the opacity till we mostly get a gray value. This is kind of adding and removing details from our original. You can decide how much you want it. I will blur it again to make it a little bit softer. This is fine for the base. You can try some other ways to getting something similar. We can move on to adding some surface variation or grain. I will take a warp again. This time for the input, I will take the clouds heavy. Any kind of clouds or detail noise will work. This is too harsh, so let's pull it back to a really low intensity. We can use a really low blur for the clouds. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it will show up later on with our gradient map for the color. Next, I want even finer details. Add a dense noise and multiply that. That's too much, so let's pull it back till we start seeing the base again. This is still too much for my liking, so what we can do is add something like a Perlin noise. Low scale, increase the gamma. Connect this to the opacity mask and we are controlling the areas where the noise appears. So basically we are limiting the noise to the white areas in the Perlin noise and change the seed to get a different result. Also, since this basically acts as a multiplier, we can get really fine control over the intensity. We can also play around with the output levels to control the range. Maybe we want the grain to appear everywhere but a really low intensity, so bring up the blacks, or we can also reduce the intensity by bringing down the whites. This slider is pretty much same as adding a levels node and playing with the bottom handles in the levels. Okay, now we have some nice sand waves with some surface details. That will be all for this sand. We can work on adding some stones scattered around. Now there are a lot of ways to make stones. This is just something easy and quick. We start with a Perlin noise and up the scale to get some smaller details. And we use the levels and really pinch our values to get some small blob-like shapes. Then we use a flood fill. I'm taking the flood fill to B box or bounding box with exclude border. This basically makes it so the larger bits are brighter and the smaller ones are darker. We can also use the flood fill to color in grayscale and subtract that for some more variation. Then some flood filter gradients with random variation. And a minimum blend mode to get slices for the borders. A histogram to control that. And we can multiply this. And we can take the whole thing and just multiply it with our base. To finish off, we can take a flood filter mask and multiply that so we can randomly mask out some of these tones. That looks good. Let's blend this. We do add and low opacity. Now you can see how this kind of just fades into our material. I don't want that. I want a harsher cutoff. To do that, let's get a histogram edit from our stones. And I want a black and white mask for this. Connect this to the opacity mask. There's certainly other ways to do this. You can also experiment with the height blend. To get rid of these pixelated borders, I will add a really low blur This is blurring everything, but I just want to limit the blur to the stones. We can enable the mask for the blur. And for the mask, we can duplicate the histogram. Max out the master value. Expand the shapes with a distance. Really low value like 0.005. And connect it. And we successfully smoothed out the stone intersection without losing any details on the sand. Maybe you can try something to get a mask just at the intersection, like a ring for the shape, and black on the inside as well, so that the blur doesn't affect the details on the stone. But that would be too much work for something you never notice, so we won't do that now. Then an auto levels to finish off the height map. We can also try a brightness contrast before the auto levels to control it a bit more. And we have our height map completed. So let's move on to our roughness. Nothing too complex, just take your levels from the ambient occlusion. We can add dots noise. Make it really small. And add some variance. Reduce the density. Blend this with our levels and subtract it. This gives an interesting glittery shine from certain angles. It's a really cool effect that I noticed in some stylized games, usually for sand and also snow materials. We also want to have control over the roughness of the rocks. Add a solid color and blend it. For the opacity mask, we can just take the output from these stones. Leave it at default, and now we have control over the roughness with the luminance slider. That's it for the roughness. We don't need to add another levels as this is a simple setup, and we can go back and control the first levels for any changes. Moving on to the base color, add a curvature map. You can use an auto levels, but this may cause issues with the color map. I will show you that once we complete the base color. Let's do a gradient map. Just taking a light brown and a dark brown and just alternating it to get this kind of a chaotic color map. HSL to adjust it a little bit. Add clouds with another gradient map for some variation. Blend it with the mode set to hue. For these stones, blend a solid color. For the opacity mask, we can take the histogram edit from earlier. We want to expand the mask. We can use a distance node again, but as an alternative, we can blur the mask. Add the levels to pinch the values. This method expands and also gives nice soft edges. And we can now change the color of these stones to something light and desaturated. We can stop here, but I'll just add another solid color and blend it. Use the opacity mask from the dots we made for the roughness. Make it a lighter color. We don't really need this, but I just want to add subtle color for the dots. We will still keep it low till it's barely noticeable. A final HSL to control any slight changes. And that should do it for the material. By the way, let me show you what I mean with the auto levels here. Let's say we don't want these stones, so we disable the color blend and the height blend. You can see how the color changes completely. The reason is that the auto levels is calculating the range with the stones and the sand together. But when we disable these stones, it's giving a different range for just the sand. So if you want to use the auto levels and you want to make any changes, you will have to go back and adjust the gradient map and the colors based on the new range. And if you just disable the auto levels for the curvature map, switching the stones doesn't affect your color. So it's a better idea to not use the auto levels and just come up with the proper gradient map. Apart from that, you can also try a different gradient map here. Instead of the alternating values, we can do a normal dark to light colors. This gives a slightly different look. And if we go back to our base, we can leave everything in front as it is, as they are doing their own job. We can swap out the entire base to get a different look. Here I have two other setups with a single 6-sided polygon scattered at an angle. You can quickly take a look at the settings I used. And we are warping it with the same pattern we used earlier for our first base. And a blur to slightly smooth it out. Here's another base. It's the same setup, but I used the maximum blend mode in the tile scatter with some different values. Same warp pattern, but I changed up the scale to get smaller circles. And this way you can get some variation in different patterns. You can also try to make a different kind of stone scatter and connect it here, and it should all work just fine. So yeah, that will be all for this video. I hope you found it useful. Leave a like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.